A helicopter descended onto the sprawling grounds of a lavish countryside estate. The grand mansion belonged to none other than Christopher Reed, one of the few remaining national-level hunters. As the rotor blades slowed, Christopher stepped onto the front steps, his expression composed but curious as he noticed the arrival of the Vice Director of the Hunter Bureau, accompanied by a calm yet visibly tense Norma Selner. He raised an eyebrow in mild surprise. No visit had been scheduled for today. Still maintaining his cool demeanor, he gestured for them to enter and casually remarked that if their visit had anything to do with a recently emerged S-rank gate in the east, they were wasting their time. He had no intention of getting involved, but the vice director shook his head. This wasn't about a gate. The matter was far more pressing. Leading them into a private chamber, Christopher instructed a maid to ensure they remained undisturbed. Once seated, he leaned back, his voice steady, as he asked what had truly brought them here. From the tension etched across their faces, he already sensed this wasn't a routine visit. Norma Selner took the seat across from him. Her voice was calm yet resolute as she revealed the purpose of their arrival. This wasn't a briefing. It was a warning. She had seen a vision. His life was in imminent danger. The moment the words left her lips, something shifted in Christopher. He abruptly set his teacup down, the sharp clink echoing in the quiet room. Without meeting her eyes, his tone dropped, deep and serious. He acknowledged her past help with a sense of gratitude, but reminded her that they weren't close enough for such grim jokes. Then slowly, his gaze rose to meet hers. Cold, focused, a quiet storm behind his eyes. He reminded her with heavy authority exactly who she was speaking to. The air in the room grew heavy with the weight of his words. Yet Miss Selner didn't waver. With her eyes briefly closing, she recalled the haunting vision she had seen. One where he stood surrounded by men, a dark and dangerous aura pressing in from all sides. This wasn't a vague sense of unease. It was a certainty. She knew he was going to die, but Christopher's patience had already begun to fray. The notion that she had travelled all this way just to speak of what he considered delusions left a bitter edge to his mood. Christopher's tone sharpened, laced with anger, as he challenged the very notion. Did she truly expect a national-level hunter like him to believe he could be killed? But Miss Selner remained steady. She pressed on, speaking of destiny, of an inescapable path, and of a fragile thread of hope that, in her belief, still remained. Christopher scoffed, his voice rich with scorn. Did she seriously believe there was anyone alive capable of protecting someone like him? He declared, with unwavering confidence, that no such person existed, but Miss Selner didn't back down. There might be one, she said softly. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of caution flashing across his face as he studied her. Then she spoke a name. Sung Jin-Woo. For a moment, Christopher fell completely silent. Doubt crept into his gaze, subtle but undeniable. Without another word, Miss Selner turned and walked out, leaving behind only her ominous warning and a lingering silence heavy with uncertainty. That night, an eerie calm blanketed Christopher Reed's mansion, a silence too perfect, too absolute. Christopher lay asleep in his bed, but suddenly jolted upright, eyes sharp and alert. Something had stirred him from within, something unnatural. He slipped on his robe and stepped into the dimly lit hallway, guided more by instinct than reason. The stillness around him clung like a second skin. It wasn't just quiet, it was wrong. With rising suspicion, Christopher grabbed a wine glass from a nearby table and hurled it down the corridor with a swift, precise motion. The glass shattered, but there was no sound, and that confirmed it. Something, or someone, was here. A chill spread through his spine as his thoughts returned to Miss Selner and the vice-director. Their warning, the vision, he hadn't believed them, but now he could feel it. Then, without a sound, a man appeared at the far end of the hallway, blonde hair, serene smile. Hands calmly folded behind his back. Christopher's senses exploded into high alert. Two more presences loomed behind the stranger, silent but undeniable. Without even turning to face them, he issued a cold demand, "Show yourselves." But the blonde man wasn't focused on him. Lifting his gaze slightly, he spoke, not to Christopher, but to something else. In the chilling, ancient language of monsters, he uttered a message. If the fragment of light continues to side with the humans, then none shall be saved. Christopher's brow tightened. The words made no sense. What was this man talking about? But the blonde figure dismissed him with chilling indifference. "Be silent," he said flatly. "This conversation isn't meant for you." He was speaking to something else, something beyond Christopher, yet connected to him in a way he couldn't understand. That struck a nerve. In an instant, flames erupted around Christopher's body. His form swelled, transformed, no longer human. Engulfed in fire, he became a blazing entity of wrath and power. With fury roaring in his voice, he thundered, "At least one of you dies here." The two figures standing silently behind the blonde man watched in awe, stunned at what they were witnessing, a human achieving spiritualization. But Christopher didn't wait for awe to settle. He lunged, he unleashed his full might, fire bursting through the mansion like a living beast. The flames devoured walls, ceilings, everything in their path. The clash shook the estate to its foundation. Whether Christopher survived or not remained unknown. But the devastation he left behind was absolute. Meanwhile, across the sea in Japan, it was Sung Jin-Woo's final day there. Escorted by a sleek black car and an official convoy, he headed toward the airport. The streets were overflowing. Thousands had gathered for a glimpse of the man who had saved their city. Even Baru, standing by his liege's side, suggested with enthusiasm that Jin-Woo raise a hand like a king to acknowledge the people. But Jin-Woo shut the idea down immediately. He wasn't interested in being worshipped. Soon the convoy arrived at the airport. He exchanged brief formalities with government officials and boarded his flight back to Korea. As he settled into his seat, he noticed a familiar face beside him, Adam White of the Federal Bureau of Hunters. Was this just coincidence, or another carefully planned approach by the Bureau? Adam didn't pretend otherwise. With a slight shrug, he admitted it was intentional. Jin-Woo offered a cool greeting, remembering their past encounter. "What brings you here this time?" he asked. Adam, aware that showing up unannounced might cross some lines, leaned in. "There's something urgent I need to show you." Immediately, Jin-Woo's mind went to the worst. Did the US fail to contain the S-rank gate? He asked. Adam quickly reassured him. Number that was handled. But this is far more serious. Without delay, he pulled out his laptop and opened a video file. On screen, black smoke curling into the air, wildfires raging, firefighters running desperately. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed as he studied the footage. "What am I looking at?" Aunt Adam's voice turned grim. The one who caused all this, there was Christopher Reed. Even after deploying 1,800 firefighters and 14 high-tier hunters, they had barely managed to suppress the flames. Jin-Woo understood instantly this wasn't ordinary destruction. A battle of terrifying proportions had taken place. He asked quietly, "What happened to Christopher?" Adam paused the video, a freeze frame of Christopher's scorched body, riddled with wounds. By the time we found him, he was already dead. Then Adam reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. "This," he said, "is the man we believe was behind it." The moment Jin-Woo laid eyes on the photo, something inside him snapped. Without warning, ruler's authority activated. Adam was yanked mid-air from his seat, crushed under an invisible pressure, his laptop crumpled like paper. He screamed in agony, suspended and helpless under Jin-Woo's furious gaze. With his voice colder than death, Jin-Woo growled, "If this is some twisted joke, you're not leaving this plane alive." Panicked, Adam waved off the bodyguards who had started to react. Still suspended in the air by an invisible force, he gasped, Wait, please, just listen." His voice cracked under pressure as he rushed to explain. "The man in that photo, he came out of a dungeon. We're not sure it's who you think." Jin-Woo's eyes remained locked on him, unblinking. Struggling to breathe, Adam continued, "His aura. It didn't feel human. It wasn't like a hunter's. It felt more like a monster's." The words barely made it past his lips when he added something even more shocking. "The explosion at the Hunter Bureau headquarters months ago, that was him too." Silence fell. Then, slowly, the pressure vanished. Jin-Woo released ruler's authority, and Adam collapsed into his seat, coughing violently. Jin-Woo sat back, but his mind swirled with chaos. His father's face. That photo, it couldn't be. Tension eased only slightly in the cabin. Still catching his breath, Adam pushed forward. "He's already attacked multiple S-rank hunters, then vanished. We know how hard this is for you, but all the evidence we have points to him." Jin-Woo's face remained unreadable. "Why show this to me now?" he asked quietly. Adam took a steadying breath. "It's about the International Guild Conference. The Bureau is going to issue a red notice. So far, this has been a classified investigation, but that changes at the conference. We wanted you to know before the rest of the world found out." He paused, eyes serious. "We've lost a national-level hunter, and we intend to pursue the one responsible with everything we've got." Then, softer, more sincerely, he added, "But before we made it public, out of respect, we came to you first." Jin-Woo didn't respond. His father, missing for over a decade, had returned. But maybe not as the man he once knew. That truth, heavier than any battlefield, settled over him like a shadow. Meanwhile, Adam, still wincing from the pain in his chest, couldn't hide his awe. Telekinesis wasn't uncommon among top-tier magic hunters, but what Jin-Woo had shown, that level of control, power, and precision, it was in a league of its own. Only national-level hunters could wield such terrifying force. There was no longer any doubt in Adam's mind. Sung Jin-Woo was the 6th national-level hunter, and the vice director needed to know. As the International Guild Conference drew closer, global anticipation only grew. Soon the U.S. Hunters Association released the official list of participants, and one name stood out above all: Korea's Ajin Guild. The world was stunned. Discussions exploded across forums and newsrooms. Ajin, just one top-class hunter? But the message was loud and clear. That one hunter, Sung Jin-Woo, was worth more than all the others combined. As the spotlight turned toward him, Jin-Woo became the epicenter of global attention, and the first ripple of that impact arrived at the Korean Hunters Association. Chief Woo Jin-Chul stepped briskly into President Go Gun-hee's office, a report folder clutched in hand. "Mr. President," he said urgently, "we've received a formal request from the Chinese government." Go raised an eyebrow. "What kind of request?" "They want all available information on Hunter Sung Jin-Woo, raid records, ability reports, anything publicly documented." The president leaned back, thoughtful. "And why," he asked slowly, "would China want anything to do with Jin-Woo? He's made it clear he has no interest in working with foreign guilds or leaving Korea. Woo Jin-Chul frowned. I don't know, sir, but something tells me this is just the beginning. But then Gentile clarified something that made President Go pause mid-thought. The request, he said, didn't come from the Chinese government. He hesitated for a moment and then revealed the name Lu Zhigang. The moment it left his lips, President Go froze. Lu Zhigang, China's 7-star hunter. A man who had stood alone against monstrous calamities, now asking for information on Sung Jin-Woo. In that revelation landed like a thunderclap in the president's mind. Woo Jin-Chul added, apparently it has something to do with Lu Zhigang's past encounter with a giant-type monster. After learning how Jin-Woo wiped out the entire army of giants in Japan, he grew curious. A knowing smile spread slowly across President Go's face. I see ... He tapped his fingers on the desk, then waved his hand dismissively. Reject the request. Or at most, give them surface-level information. Nothing detailed, nothing that truly reveals his capabilities. Meanwhile, at the Scavenger Guild in America, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Preparations for the International Guild Conference were in full swing. Laura walked briskly into Thomas Andre's office, an update in hand. Jin-Woo is scheduled to arrive tomorrow, she said. Thomas nodded and glanced at his calendar, but before he could speak, the door creaked open. The man he had summoned had arrived. Hwang Dong-soo stepped in. Without pleasantries, without delay, Thomas Andre walked toward him, gaze like steel. No matter what happens during this conference, Thomas said firmly, Sung Jin-Woo is not to be touched. Dong-soo's face twitched, equal parts frustration and disbelief. But Thomas continued, eyes boring into him. I know what happened between Jin-Woo and your brother. The air in the room dropped in temperature. I understand your need for closure, but that's in the past now. Dong-soo opened his mouth to protest. But Thomas lifted one finger. That single motion carried the weight of a mountain, and Hwang Dong-soo, an S-rank hunter, he all froze. Under the pressure of the guild master's aura, his breath caught. Fear flickered behind his eyes. From across the room, Laura watched the scene unfold, the quiet dominance in Thomas Andre's command. Very few in the world could silence a man like Hwang Dong-soo with a gesture. But Thomas Andre was not like most men. Placing a heavy hand on Dong-soo's shoulder, he repeated himself. Stay away from Jin-Woo, no contact, no matter what. Then, as if tying the knot, Thomas offered a suggestion. A break! At the guild's private resort, somewhere far from the conference. A long silence followed. Dong-soo clenched his jaw, his pride wounded, but gave a slow, stiff nod. Without a word, he turned and walked out. But Laura could feel it. Even after he left, that grudge, the hatred, hadn't gone anywhere. She turned to Thomasin. Are you sure it was wise to let him walk out so easily? Thomas didn't answer right away. His eyes remained on the closed door, his expression unreadable. But in that silence, the air was still thick with unease. Let me know when you're ready to move to Jin-Woo's arrival in the US, the start of the guild conference, or his face-off with other national-level hunters. Thomas Andre, arms folded, gave his answer without a second of doubt. He won't back down. That's why you're going to keep an eye on him, Laura, until Jin-Woo leaves this country. Hwang Dong-soo is your shadow. His tone turned colder. Because if he tries anything, he won't live to see another day. And then the day arrived. From all across the world, the elite of the elite descended on the United States, guildmasters, national-level hunters, titans in human form. The International Guild Conference had officially begun. Airports were swarmed, reporters scrambled, cameras flashed endlessly. The energy? It's electric. Among the arriving legends stood Leonard Neumann, Germany's #1 hunter and master of the RTOR Guild. Flanked by security and aides, he walked confidently through the chaos. But his attention was caught by something unusual, something powerful. "What's all this commotion?" he asked his vice-guild master. The man replied, "It's him, the Korean hunter, Jin-Woo. He just landed." Leonard's gaze followed the wave of flashing cameras, and there, across the lot, he saw him. Sung Jin-Woo, dressed in black, unreadable as stone, walking through the crowd like he owned the world. Leonard adjusted his coat, ready to greet him and perhaps build rapport. But then, he stopped. Cold, still, silent. His vice-guildmaster gave him a puzzled look. "Sir, you're not going?" But Leonard didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on Jin-Woo and the figures trailing behind him. Shadows, dozens of them, and then the truth struck him like lightning. "I thought he summoned them," Leonard whispered, "from another dimension. But no, they're always with him." This wasn't a hunter arriving for diplomacy. This was a king arriving for war. Jin-Woo, sensing the weight of someone's stare, glanced sideways. "Someone watching?" Jin-Ho asked with a grin. Jin-Woo nodded lightly. "Some foreigner's been staring for a while." Jin-Ho laughed. "Maybe he's a fan. Should we give him an autograph?" But the mood shifted as Adam White approached, flanked by agents of the U.S. Hunter Bureau. He offered a crisp welcome, all professionalism and smiles. Jin-Woo gave a polite nod. Adam then gestured toward the staff, directing them to escort Yu Jin-Ho and Woo Jin-Chul to their accommodations. But when he turned to Jin-Woo and said, "Would you stay back? There's something we'd like to discuss privately." Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed. "This about my father?" Adam quickly shook his head. Nothing of the sort. No threats, no danger. In fact, quite the opposite. Still, Jin-Woo didn't relax. "What's this really about?" Adam stayed vague. "We can't discuss it here. It's top secret. You'll understand when we get to HQ." The black SUV glided silently through the streets. Inside, Adam's voice was low, tense. He explained the situation carefully. "Christopher Reed's death is still under wraps. We haven't made it public. A national-level hunter is gone, and now there's a gap. Resources had been diverted, investigations launched. They were searching for a replacement." Jin-Woo didn't respond at first, then quietly asked, "And you think I'm one of the candidates?" Adam met his gaze and nodded silently. No need for words. The weight of that nod said everything. Then, without another word, he reached for the center console. A soft chime, a flicker of light, a hologram shimmered to life before them. There it was, a towering, lifeless behemoth, Kamish, the corpse of the strongest dragon-type magical beast ever recorded, and beside it, something glowing, pulsing, a rune stone, still radiating with terrifying power. The car was silent, except for the faint hum of ancient magic echoing through the air. The air inside the Hunter Command Center felt thick with anticipation. As the car rolled to a stop, Adam and Jin-Woo exited swiftly, their presence drawing the attention of the staff on site. The hum of activity seemed to slow as they approached the building's entrance. Inside the high-security facility, Director David Brennan stood waiting, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The doors to his office swung open as Adam led Jin-Woo inside. As soon as David saw them, his gaze immediately locked onto Jin-Woo, the enigmatic Korean hunter who had stirred so much intrigue. "So, what brings you here, Jin-Woo?" David asked, his voice steady but layered with curiosity. Jin-Woo's eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on the director. "I've come to see Kamish's body." The words hung in the air, heavy, and for a moment the room seemed to freeze. David blinked, clearly not expecting that request. The body? But... His voice faltered for a moment. We didn't discuss that. Adam cut him off with a firm tone. It's his request. He has every right to see it. David hesitated. You're aware of the risks, right? The body is highly classified for a reason. It's far more dangerous than you might understand. Even with our top-level clearance, we've barely begun understanding the runestone's power. Jin-Woo's eyes remained cold, unblinking. I know. With that, he turned to Adam. Get clearance now. Moments later, Adam placed a quick call to his superior. The conversation was short, but decisive. Clearance granted, he said, hanging up the phone. The group was led into a secure chamber. A cold, sterile silence greeted them as they stepped inside. At the center of the room stood Kamish's corpse, its colossal size making the walls seem small by comparison. The air felt heavy with magic. The dragon's twisted, monstrous form lay sprawled across a cold metal slab, glowing faintly under the harsh lighting. The body radiated an unnatural aura, its presence suffocating. For a moment, Jin-Woo just stared. Adam could see the shifting emotions flickering behind Jin-Woo's eyes, something darker than the usual indifference. This was Kamish, the nightmare that had nearly destroyed humanity. And now, here it lay, dead and preserved, waiting to be studied by those brave enough or foolish enough to attempt understanding its power. David cleared his throat, trying to lighten the tension. We haven't figured out much, to be honest. There's a lot of research to be done still. Jin-Woo took a step forward, eyes locked on Kamish's mangled body. How long has it been since Kamish fell? A year, David replied, watching Jin-Woo's every move. Since the battle at the dimensional rift, we've been guarding this secret ever since. Jin-Woo nodded, but didn't speak. His focus was on the corpse, his mind racing with thoughts, calculations, and questions no one else could fathom. After a long silence, Jin-Woo turned to Adam. Where is the rune stone? Adam flinched, visibly uneasy. It's embedded within Kamish's chest. We've kept it isolated to prevent it from activating. We don't know its full potential, but we know it's far beyond anything we've encountered. Jin-Woo's expression hardened, but there was something else there. Resolve. I want it. David's face went pale. That's not possible, Jin-Woo. The runestone's power is far too dangerous. We can't just... No, Jin-Woo interrupted, his voice carrying a quiet authority that brooked no argument. I need it. Now. A tense silence filled the room until Adam finally nodded. We'll extract it. As Adam ordered the extraction to begin, the holographic projectors came to life once again. Jin-Woo slowly raised his hand. The very air around him rippled, warping under the weight of dark energy. In a calm, unwavering voice, he spoke a single word. Arise! A surge of shadowy energy burst forth, swirling like black mist as it rushed toward the dragon's lifeless body. The lights in the chamber flickered wildly, but just as quickly as it began, everything stopped. A system prompt flashed before Jin-Woo's eyes. Shadow extraction failed. Unshaken, he narrowed his eyes. He still had 2 attempts left. Drawing his power inward, Jin-Woo focused once more, ignoring the gasps of the stunned observers behind him as the ground trembled again. He gave the command a second time. This time, the shadows stirred. A thunderous roar ripped through the chamber as Kamish's colossal form twitched, then slowly began to rise. Tremendous force coursed through its frame as it awakened from death, dark power flooding its massive veins. Overhead, the lights burst violently and the walls groaned under the pressure of the reborn monster. Kamish stood tall once more, a towering figure cloaked in shadow. Its blazing eyes scanned the room before settling on Jin-Woo. And then, as if grasping some distant memory, Kamish spoke, not with rage, but with recognition. It addressed him not as an enemy, but as its master, the Shadow Monarch, the king of the dead. Panic erupted among the onlookers. Adam stood frozen in shock. David struggled to breathe, disbelief tightening around his chest. Others stumbled back, paralyzed by terror, unable to grasp the impossible scene before them. Kamish's gaze slowly shifted to the humans behind Jin-Woo. Its voice dropped to a guttural growl. In the next instant, darkness fell over the chamber, heavy and suffocating, radiating the beast's bloodlust. A low snarl escaped its throat. It had made a vow all humans would die. The entire room quaked violently. Reinforced walls cracked like dry earth, magical barriers infused with high rancor mana shattered like brittle glass beneath Kamish's wrath. From a distance, David watched, paralyzed, as the dragon's jaws lit with an ominous glow. It was preparing to unleash dragon breath, and in that moment he knew they wouldn't survive what was coming. But before Kamish could unleash its fury, Jin-Woo's voice sliced through the chaos like a blade, sharp, cold, and commanding. His tone held no hesitation, no room for defiance. He reminded the beast that the mana crystal once embedded in its skull, the same crystal that had enslaved it to the rulers, was gone. Kamish froze. The glow building in its throat dimmed, its wrath wavered, then vanished entirely. Adam could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Almost in disbelief, he muttered aloud. Had Jin-Woo just spoken in the ancient language of monsters? Beside him, the deputy stared wide-eyed, unable to process the sight before them. Kamish, once the deadliest creature ever unleashed upon humanity, now stood silent and calm, bowing its head before Jin-Woo. Its rage had faded, replaced by something deeper. Recognition. It spoke again, slower this time, its voice carrying the weight of acceptance. Once it had served the King of Dragons. Now it bowed to a new master, the Shadow Monarch. Jin-Woo slowly stepped forward, standing before the towering dragon. He placed a steady hand on Kamish's dark scales and spoke in a low voice, asking if it had truly served the King of Dragons. Kamish confirmed with solemn reverence. It had once followed the King of Mad Dragons, known across realms as the Monarch of Destruction. The revelation hit Jin-Woo like a wave. Even as a summoned shadow, Kamish radiated raw, uncontrollable fury, and it still possessed a will of its own. In the silence that followed, his mind drifted to the vision the system had once shown him, the 9 monarchs. He remembered the king of the dead, the Shadow Monarch, the king of giants, the monarch of the beginning. And now the puzzle gained another piece. Kamish had once served another monarch, one whose dominion was absolute ruin, a being born from chaos, but the moment of clarity was short-lived. Kamish's voice turned heavy, final. It told Jin-Woo their time together would not last. Its body, trapped for too long in the abyss, was reaching its limit. The magic that once sustained it was unraveling. Dust began to fall from Kamish's frame like ash in the wind. 8 long years had drained its strength completely. Jin-Woo's eyes widened, even with the limitless power of the Shadow Monarch. Was he truly powerless against time? A desperate plea echoed within Jin-Woo's mind as he called out to the system, hoping for a miracle, but the system remained silent. Kamish's voice was fading now, each word softer than the last, carried with quiet resignation. It spoke of envy, jealous of the shadow soldiers who would remain forever by Jin-Woo's side. Then, mustering the last of its strength, the dragon offered a warning. There were 4 humans, individuals who had borrowed the power of the rulers. Kamish urged Jin-Woo to be cautious of them. Jin-Woo stood in silence, powerless to intervene, as Kamish's immense form began to disintegrate, its mighty body reduced to a shower of radiant particles vanishing into the void. Moments later, a message appeared before Jin-Woo. Shadow extraction failed. He didn't respond. No emotion crossed his face. Turning calmly, he called out to Adam. "Tell Director David he apologizes, and that he'll personally compensate for the damage caused." But beneath that composed exterior, frustration burned. As Jin-Woo walked away from the ruined lair, his clenched fist trembled. The emotions he had suppressed finally surged. With a single strike, he smashed his fist into the wall beside him. The impact rattled the building, sending a visible tremor through the structure. Behind him, David and Adam froze, stunned into speechless silence. When Jin-Woo stepped out of the facility, he found Chief Woo Jinchul already waiting for him, concern written across his face. Jinchul mentioned that they'd been trying to reach him, but every attempt had failed. Still weary from everything that had transpired, Jin-Woo responded simply. He'd been in a place where no calls could get through. Then Jinchul asked a question that stopped him cold. "Have you seen Jin-Ho?" Jin-Woo frowned. "What do you mean?" Jinchul explained that Jin-Ho had left hours ago after receiving a message, allegedly from Jin-Woo, saying he was waiting at the Hunter Bureau headquarters. But Jin-Woo had sent no such message. He had just come from the Bureau, and Jin-Ho wasn't there. Adam, having overheard the conversation, stepped in to confirm Jin-Ho's name hadn't shown up in the visitor logs either. Jinchul nodded grimly, recalling that a hunter from the Scavenger Guild had come to pick Jin-Ho up 2 hours earlier. The air turned thick with tension. Adam immediately suggested they contact the Scavenger Guild without delay, and no time was wasted. Adam pulled out his phone and made the call. Laura picked up almost instantly. The moment he explained what had happened, her expression shifted. Her voice tightened. "Does Jin-Woo know?" she asked. Adam hesitated. He didn't have all the answers, just that Jin-Ho was missing and they were already on the move to find him. Laura didn't press further. She understood the implications instantly. Her tone grew firm as she promised to investigate from her side and get back as soon as she had something. Adam turned to relay the update to Jin-Woo, but Jin-Woo was already gone. Far above the city, across rooftops and towers, a dark blur streaked through the skyline. Jin-Woo leaping in massive bounds, a shadow propelled by urgency, a storm churned in his chest. He should have seen this coming. He should have placed a guard on Jin-Ho. He shouldn't have let his guard down, not after what happened at Gina's school. The memory of that day stabbed through his thoughts like a cold blade. He wouldn't let history repeat itself. Without hesitation, he thrust out his hand. From beneath his feet, blackness exploded outward, shadows rippling through concrete like a living tide. The army had been summoned. Thousands of shadow soldiers scattered, spilling into alleys, gliding through skies, sweeping across the city. Their orders were clear. Find Jin-Ho. Jin-Woo stood atop a skyscraper, the wind battering his coat, eyes scanning the vast sprawl below. Despite his stoic exterior, a flicker of unease cracked through. His supernatural senses combed every street, every rooftop, every heartbeat below. Still no sign of Jin-Ho. Something was wrong. Jin-Ho wasn't the type to disappear without a trace, and certainly not the type to fall without resistance. He was a combat-type hunter, skilled, prepared, and yet gone. A single name echoed through Jin-Woo's mind. Scavenger Guild. The pieces clicked into place. Hwang Dong-soo, he must have known. predicted their arrival in America with chilling accuracy. Jin-Woo clenched his fists as an old memory stirred, a warning once spoken, one that now echoed with ominous clarity. Guroktaru's dungeon. Only two survivors had emerged, Jin-Ho and Hwang Dong-su's brother. And now the past had come back full circle. Retribution was on the move. Jin-Woo didn't regret what he had done in that dungeon. He had made his choice. And he would make it again. But now, standing above a city that offered no answers, no trail, a single thought burned relentlessly in his mind. He should have protected Jin-Ho. The guilt tightened around his chest like iron chains. Meanwhile, tension was suffocating the air inside the Scavenger Guild's headquarters. Thomas Andre sat still, back rigid, hands clasped tightly before him, as report after report came in. Nothing. No leads, no signs. His hunters were coming up empty, and that terrified him. He knew Hwang Dong-su, knew how dangerous he could be, but also how reckless he could become when chasing something personal. Thomas leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. Dong-su wasn't stupid. He was an S rank. He knew the power difference. He knew exactly who Jin-Woo was, so why go through with this? The answer was clear now. Dong-su was counting on him. He wanted Thomas to step in, to back him, to protect him when the storm hit. And if that was the case, then everything was already spiraling toward disaster. Without waiting, he picked up his phone and rang Laura. Laura informed him that with help from the Hunter Bureau, they had traced Dong-su's movements over the last month and narrowed down 3 potential locations. Thomas didn't hesitate. He ordered full deployment. Every available guild member was to sweep those sites, and he would head out personally. But just before ending the call, something nagged at him. He asked how Laura had managed to get the Bureau to move so quickly. Her reply was simple but heavy. She told him the truth, that if Dong-su wasn't found soon, it would come down to a clash between Thomas Andre and Sung Jin-Woo. At the Hunter Bureau, the news hit like a shockwave. Adam relayed the update to the staff. The Scavenger Guild had cancelled all its scheduled raids. Every member had been mobilized. They were treating this like a crisis. The deputy director paused mid-step when he heard. The scale of the operation said everything. If the entire Scavenger Guild was moving, then Thomas Andre wasn't just aware. He was personally involved. This wasn't some internal dispute anymore. Something massive was unfolding, and the entire guild was racing to stop it before it reached the point of no return. The heart of the chaos lay inside a long-abandoned factory in the United States. Inside, Jin-Ho lay unconscious on the cold concrete floor, bruised and bloodied, while a few men loomed over him. One among them, his voice laced with uncertainty, questioned whether they were really okay with this. Dong-su, standing over Jin-Ho with a look of disdain, dismissed the concern with a cold assurance that everything was under control. He wasn't planning to kill the kid, just get a few answers. He remembered Thomas's stern warning not to provoke Jin-Woo, but Dong-su had never planned to confront Jin-Woo directly. His sights had always been set on Jin-Ho. He needed the truth that haunted him, the confirmation that Jin-Woo was the one who had killed his brother. That single truth would be enough to end it. Dong-su, shaking with a cold fury, slapped Jin-Ho hard across the face, trying to provoke a reaction. When the blow failed to stir him, Dong-su's patience shattered. Without hesitation, he drove his fist into Jin-Ho's already bruised ribs. The force of the punch ripped a tortured scream from Jin-Ho's throat, blood spilling from his mouth as his dazed eyes fluttered open, filled with pain. One of Dong-su's men, observing from the side, watched silently, almost detached, commenting on Jin-Ho's toughness. He noted, almost clinically, that an average man would have been dead by now from the abuse. But Dong-Su wasn't impressed by Jin-Ho's endurance. His frustration grew. Gripping Jin-Ho by the hair, he slammed his head into the wall, the sickening crack echoing through the abandoned factory. He then yanked him back upright, leaning in close. With a quiet, menacing voice, Dong-Su muttered, "I'm not going to kill you yet, but I'll keep torturing you, healing you each time you almost die, until you confess." His voice dropped into mockery as he added, "No one's here to save you. This factory's deserted. No one's coming. Is the pain finally making you talk?" Jin-Ho, drenched in blood, barely conscious, was still defiant. With a groan, he lifted a trembling hand and raised his middle finger, cursing through split lips. The sight of it sent Dong-Su's rage into a frenzy. With a vicious snarl, Dong-Su slammed Jin-Ho's head into the wall once more. This time, Jin-Ho's body went limp, collapsing to the floor, motionless, his strength drained, his spirit barely hanging on. From behind, one of the men, his voice cautious, stepped forward. "Dong-Su, be careful," he warned. "If things go too far, we'll have a mess to clean up." Dong-Su didn't even glance at him. His lips curled into a sinister smile, reflecting the cruelty of the brother he had lost. "I haven't even started yet," he muttered darkly. Just as Dong-Su stepped forward to continue his cruel torment, something shifted in the dim light at the far end of the factory. His eyes narrowed, picking out the silhouette of a high orc, standing motionless in the shadows. Confusion rippled through him. Was it a dungeon break nearby? But what unsettled him more was the orc's behavior. It wasn't snarling, attacking, or in any way threatening. Instead, the creature stood frozen, trembling in fear, and the source of its terror wasn't Dong-Su. Without hesitation, Dong-Su charged toward the orc, ready to strike it down with a single blow. But just as he raised his fist, a deep voice sliced through the stillness of the room, commanding exchange. At the same time, across the world, Jin-Woo's mother sat in her living room, her brows furrowed in worry. The television in front of her flickered with breaking news, reports of strange, dangerous occurrences happening all over the globe. She trembled slightly as she voiced her concerns, wondering aloud if Jin-Woo was all right amidst the chaos unfolding around them. Biru, who had been tasked with watching over her, observed quietly from the shadows. With deep reverence, he assured her, "If there is anything their king cannot overcome, then nothing in this world can." The broadcast shifted, cutting to live footage from a conference in the United States. The camera briefly captured Jin-Woo as he stepped onto the scene. Jin-Woo's mother pointed toward the screen, a hint of pride in her voice as she called Jin-Woo's attention to it. Biru's gaze lingered on the screen, his own eyes filled with reverence and pride. But then in an instant, his entire body tensed. A cold shiver ran through him, the unmistakable surge of dark, violent energy washing over his senses. He had felt this once before, the wrath of Jin-Woo. The king's anger cut through dimensions like a blade. Back in America, Thomas Andre, racing toward one of the suspected locations, suddenly froze in his seat. A deep, overwhelming sensation gripped his instincts. Without a moment's hesitation, he shouted to the driver, "Stop the car!" The command was sharp, startling the driver as the urgency of the moment took hold. When hesitation met his command, Thomas's voice broke the silence with a roar, louder and more forceful than before. The pressure in his tone left no room for delay. The car, still moving, couldn't outrun his fury. In an instant, Thomas slammed the door open with sheer brute force. Without thinking, he leapt out, the concrete beneath him cracking on impact as he landed with power. Shouting back to the hunters who were still seated behind him, Thomas ordered, "Catch up now." Then, like a blur of motion and destruction, he was off, tearing through the city streets with the speed and precision of a missile, driven by nothing but raw instinct and urgency. Meanwhile, inside the abandoned factory, everything changed in the blink of an eye. A fist, impossibly fast, crashed into Dong-Su's stomach with brutal force. The impact was so intense, it lifted him off his feet, his body sailing across the factory before slamming into the far wall. Blood sprayed from his mouth, and the shockwave of the blow rattled the entire building. The men who had stood beside him blinked in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. On the cold concrete floor, Jin-Ho, barely clinging to life, managed a faint smile. A wave of relief washed over his fading eyes as they locked onto the familiar figure now standing before him. The factory air thickened, heavy with the pressure of an overwhelming presence. The energy in the room crackled, undeniably powerful, pure, and filled with rage. And there he stood, Jin-Woo. His eyes blazed with fury, locked onto Dong-Su not as a warning, but as a sentence. Jin-Woo's arrival wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, yet it felt final, as if death itself had entered the room. Without a second thought, Jin-Woo rushed to Jin-Ho's side. He gently tilted Jin-Ho's head, pouring a healing potion into his mouth. But as the liquid hit Jin-Ho's tongue, a cold system notification flashed before Jin-Woo's eyes. The message was brief, but cruel. Healing potions cannot restore health when it falls below 10% of a person's total HP. Jin-Ho was too close to death. Frustration surged through Jin-Woo, a bitter tide threatening to consume him. Time was running out. Turning sharply to the two men nearby, his voice cut through the thick air, like a blade, cold, commanding, and demanding an answer. "Is either of you a healer?" The question wasn't a plea, it was an order. The man closest to Jin-Woo hesitated, clearly shaken by the overwhelming presence in the room. He muttered something about not understanding Korean, his voice trembling. Dong-Su, still recovering from the earlier strike, seized the opportunity to step in. With a casual air, he translated the request to his men as if it were nothing more than a simple exchange between acquaintances. But Jin-Woo didn't even spare Dong-Su a glance. His eyes were fixed on the two men, his voice colder now, each word dripping with deadly intent. "Can you heal him?" Teague, one of the men, clearly the healer, scoffed. With an arrogant smirk, he taunted, saying Jin-Woo should try convincing his boss first before making demands. Before the man could finish, Jin-Woo moved in a blur. He grabbed the man by the head and slammed it into the nearby pillar with devastating force. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the factory, and the smirk faded beneath a spray of blood. Without missing a beat, Jin-Woo turned to the second man, his patience worn thin. "Can you heal?" he asked, his voice now razor-sharp. The man stammered in reply, his hands shaking, but before he could finish his sentence, Jin-Woo slammed his head into the concrete with overwhelming force, silencing him instantly. Dong-Su, now consumed with rage, stepped forward, his voice seething with fury. "Did you kill my brother?" he demanded. On the floor, Jin-Ho stirred, barely conscious. With great effort, he whispered Jin-Woo's name, trying to warn him, but Jin-Woo's voice remained calm and soothing as he reassured Jin-Ho, telling him to rest and stay quiet. Dong-Su didn't stop. He pressed closer, demanding an answer. Jin-Woo's eyes hardened, turning to ice as he finally spoke, his voice laced with a chilling suggestion. "Go ask your brother." The words hit with the force of a knife to the heart. Dong-Su's roar of fury tore through the room. His fist flew toward Jin-Woo's face, but Jin-Woo was faster. He slipped past the punch, moving with blinding speed, and retaliated with a strike that sank deep into Dong-Su's gut. Dong-Su coughed up blood mid-air before crashing into a maze of iron pipes. The impact reverberated through the factory, an echo of brutal finality. He tried to rise, to move, but before he could fully comprehend what had happened, Jin-Woo was already crouched low beside him. His presence was suffocating, like death itself had taken form. Dong-Su howled in agony, his body trembling with rage as he lunged at Jin-Woo, but Jin-Woo's fist came down again, crashing Dong-Su's head into the steel pipes. But Jin-Woo wasn't done. His grip tightened around Dong-Su's skull, and with savage fury he slammed it into the pipes again and again. Each brutal impact sent blood splattering across the factory floor, the sickening thuds echoing in the empty space. Jin-Woo's focus never wavered. He was hell-bent on crushing every last bit of resistance left in Dong-Su's broken form. Then, as if the very foundations of the factory were protesting, a deafening crash tore through the ceiling. The ground shook as Thomas Andre landed in the center of the chaos, the explosion of dust and rubble swirling around him. He rose from the crater with calm precision, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene before him. His voice rang out, smooth yet commanding. "Stop." He reminded Dong-Su of the warning he had given him, the promise to never touch Jin-Woo. And now, seeing his guildmate battered and broken, he asked flatly, "Is he still alive?" Jin-Woo, still gripping Dong-Su by the head, replied coldly, "I'm not done yet." Thomas exhaled slowly, his voice unwavering. "Let him go. If you release him, I'll overlook this." Jin-Woo's gaze turned sharp as a knife, locking eyes with Thomas. His voice, low and ice-cold, responded, "What if I don't?" Thomas bared his teeth, his tone turning a low growl. "The offer is no longer on the table." In a single, effortless motion, Jin-Woo flung Dong-Su's limp body aside. Dong-Su flew through the air like a rag doll, crashing into the factory with an almost pitiful thud. His broken body lay sprawled on the floor, and in his fading consciousness, the only thing burning in his eyes was pure, unrelenting hatred. In his mind he cursed, urging Thomas to kill Jin-Woo in his place. He knew, deep down, that Thomas was the only one who could finish what he had started, the one person who could end this. Now Jin-Woo stood tall, facing Thomas Andre with quiet defiance. There was no fear, no hesitation, just a cold, unwavering resolve. Thomas stepped forward, his towering presence commanding the room. His voice, heavy with authority, cut through the tension as he asked, "Do you even understand who I am?" Jin-Woo's gaze remained icy and unfazed, locking with Thomas. Without a hint of doubt, his silent response was clear. He didn't care who Thomas was. It was a moment that caught Thomas off guard. For the first time he paused, uncertain of the man standing before him. This wasn't ignorance. Jin-Woo knew exactly who Thomas was, and yet he didn't care. There was no fear, no hesitation, just cold defiance. Thomas stared at him, his mind racing. That kind of fearlessness. It was something he hadn't seen in years. Memories of his own rise surged through him, memories of a past shaped by struggle. Born into poverty, always an outsider, he was never special. Until one day the gift revealed itself. A terrifying talent for overwhelming violence. He honed it through endless fights, brutal battles and bloodshed. Those who mocked him were silenced. Those who challenged him were crushed. And now, standing before this man who refused to bend, Thomas knew what had to be done. Time seemed to slow as Thomas launched forward. His roar tore through the air as his hand shot toward Jin-Woo's skull, his voice booming, "Blame your ignorance for what's about to happen." Outside, the scavenger guild had finally arrived. Hunters scrambled, securing the perimeter, when suddenly a massive force came barreling toward them like a missile. The ground quaked beneath their feet. Metal screeched. Someone skidded across the floor and landed with brutal force at their feet. It was Thomas. A stunned silence fell over the guild members. Eyes wide, breaths caught, the sight of their strongest member thrown like a rag doll left them speechless. They rushed to his side, calling his name in panic. But Thomas, with a single raised hand, silenced them. His face was dark, his pride wounded deeper than his body. Without a word, he stormed back toward the factory, fury burning in every step. The vice guild master, shaken by the sight, snapped into action. His orders were sharp, loud. "Prepare yourselves." The air was thick with tension as they readied themselves for what was to come. Inside the factory, Jin-Woo had already summoned Igris and Kaisel. Igris appeared beside him, cradling the barely breathing Jinho in his arms. Jin-Woo's voice was commanding and urgent as he ordered his summons to rush Jinho to the nearest hospital, ensuring they did everything they could to save him. Igris bowed deeply before mounting Kaisel. In an instant, they vanished into the sky, streaking toward salvation.